Hey guys, Moses Designer here doing another Unreal Engine tutorial. I'm not doing a new tutorial, I'm redoing an older one, the Landscape Mountains one, with better video editing, so people can stop stating the obvious. Anyways, you want to load Unreal Engine, and when you load it, you want to go to Library. At the bottom at the Vault, you'll see a project called Landscape Mountains. Do Create Project, give it a while, it'll show up in My Projects, double click it, and it'll load. And once it loads, you'll be at the default landscape scene. So let's get started from here. First thing I want to do, I'm going to go to File, New Level, Default. And once the default's loaded, I usually delete the player start, delete the reflection, and keep everything else as is. Might probably get rid of the fog. Alright, now we need to go to save. Always good to save. Save current level. I'll call this tutorial. And now the next thing we do is go to Window. We go to Modes. You need to type Landscape, and take Landscape, drag it in. Now give it a Landscape Editor. We need to find the correct material to put in our landscapes. We'll go to Content, pull this over from my second monitor, and we'll type Landscape, Filters, turn them off for filters, and we want you want Landscape Material Instance. So with that selected, go down here. So this is selected, and you just click on the arrow, use selected as for content browser, and now it has two layers. It has a snow layer and a grass layer. What we need to do is tell it that we need the correct material to paint snow and grass. So to make sure we can paint snow and grass, you just click on where it says None, and go to Layer Object Snow 01. Click on the grass, Layer Object Grass 01, and that's that. We can minimize our content browser. We don't need it. And now, if I move out, you see a very large grid. That is the actual landscape size. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to make it smaller so it's more manageable. And what you can do is, here at the bottom you have section size. How many quads? So a quad is a 4x4. So we can do this we can do 7x7. So basically, we have 7 down and 7 across. We can do 15 and 31, 63. So basically, how many little squares are across from each other. So we'll have 63 across and 63 down. For the tutorial, I'll do 31, 31. This seems pretty manageable right here. And we'll do create. And when you create, things will be black because we don't have our lighting set up, which is not a problem. Let's go to lit, unlit mode. And if you see the circle, that means you still have your terrain tool selected. So we'll just go back to Window, Modes, and just click on the place. And now we can select our terrain, stuff like that. So now that our terrain's in place, I'm going to delete this cube because it's z-fighting with our space. We don't need it. And that's that. Save. Now we'll go back to our modes. We'll go to landscape. And now here's where we can have some fun. The landscape editor has different tools. There's a sculpt tool, there's a brush, and smoothing things. So sculpting is what we want to use the most. You can also do smoothing, you can flatten, you can create ramps, erosion, hydro erosion, noise, things like visibility, etc. So I'm going to use the sculpt tool. The tool strength, let's set it to 0.5. The brush size right now is 4,000. It's too big. Let's set it to 1024. And the brush fall off 0.5 is perfect. So to raise terrain, you click Shift, hold Shift and your left mouse button. Sorry, just hold your left mouse button and it will start raising the terrain. If you hold Shift and left mouse button, it will lower the terrain. So we can sculpt a bit of terrain here using the left mouse and Shift left mouse. So let's do that. And you can follow, not really doing anything where you can follow along, but you can just kind of create what you want to create. And I'm going to do something really quick, just using left click to raise the terrain and Shift left click to lower the terrain. So I'm going to start my edges. Just hold left click and let's raise this up a bit. And if it's too slow, we can increase our tool strength, let's say to 0.75. And now it's building a little faster. So we have something there. Now let's say you want this to be uniform. So I can go to my sculpt tool and click on flatten. And flatten, what it picks is a certain point and it'll flatten everything to that level. So let's say I want things to be at this height. I click, left click, and start painting. And holding left click, everything is at the same level. It is flat. Actually, let me go to detail lighting mode. There. You can probably see things better now. And let me boost my skylight up just a bit. Where's my skylight? This is why I need to turn off the terrain tool. Let's boost this to 2. And we'll work on lighting only. And also I'll just for the shits and giggles, I will turn my sun actor so I don't have shadows. So my sun is facing straight down. Don't worry about that right now. I just want to have it visible so you can see what I'm working on. So let's go back to Window, Modes, Terrain. And I have the Flatten tool selected. And I'm flattening out all of this at the same level. Increase my brush size a bit. Let's go to 2000. And let's just flatten out the edges here. And let's flatten this back out to a flat area. So I did Shift left click to flatten that out. Now let's go back to our sculpt tool and just start making some stuff. Not really anything specific. So I'm just really just painting on a whim here, just building some hills and stuff like that. And let's in fact, let's build like a little river going through the middle. Let's flatten some of this out before we get to that. So go to Sculpt tool, flatten. And we can make some of this flat here at this edge. So just shift left click a little bit, back to flatten, and we'll just do that. And then we can go back to our sculpt tool and raise up the edges here. Go back to flatten. Go back to our sculpt tool. So just kind of modeling or sculpting with clay, basically, the shapes we want for our hills. And this is not to scale right now, I'm just really showing you how the tool works. So bear with me. So I'm using shift click to raise the terrain and shift left click to lower the terrain. And flatten out areas that I don't need. Okay, so that should work. And now let's go back to our lit mode. Looks kind of ugly, but we'll get to that. And let's go to our. Oh, let's keep it in. What was it? Lighting only. We'll go back to our terrain tool. We'll go to smooth. Now I'll start smoothing some things out. So here I want to change my tool strength. I don't want things to get smooth too quickly. So I'll go to a lower tool, strength of 0.5, and I'll do my brush size instead of 2000. Let's say 512. And now what I can do is, if you look here, you can see these jagged edges. I can smooth all this out just holding left click with the smooth tool. So let's just smooth out these edges. Oh, drag the window there. We can increase our brush size. Let's do 512. Let's say 768. So just going through and smoothing out our edges. And let's say I want a bigger brush size. Let's do 1024. Let's increase the strength to 0.75. And let's smooth out these upper areas here. In fact, let's do a bigger brush. Let's do 2000. And we'll just smooth all this out. That should work. And let's go back to save. Let's go back to lit mode. And let's start painting some excuse me, let's start painting some materials. So we can go to our landscape tool. There's manage, sculpt, and paint. Click on paint, and these are the two materials we had: the snow and the grass. And again, the same thing. There's a paint tool, circle brush, smoothing, and so click on the paint tool. The strength, let's say 0.5. Brush size, let's change the brush size to something smaller, 512. And let's start painting some grass. So click on the grass, and you might see that checkerboard come up. That's just the material shader, probably just calculating. But as you can see, as I click, it's painting some grass. So we'll just go through and paint this riverbank here with some grass. Let's go to unlit mode so you can see more. So I turned off my lighting, I went to unlit mode, and just with paint tool, the grass, and then the paint category here, just left click and painting away at where I want some grass. So I'm going to speed this up a bit and come back here in a second with the grass all painted. Alright, so quickly got some grass painted in. And I'm gonna do some terrain editing again because I feel like I don't have enough space. So I'm gonna go back to my manage, or my sculpt, click on the sculpt tool, click on flatten, and I'm gonna flatten out some of these areas here. And I'm gonna go back to my smooth tool, smooth out these edges. Alright, now I'm gonna go back to my paint, grass, and fill it in. Oh, I had snow, sorry. Oh, that's a good actually thing. So I did snow and I don't want snow. So I can shift left click and erase it. Go back to grass and start painting the grass with shift click. So if you want to erase something, it's shift left click. So basically in the terrain tool, clicking paints and shift click erases. So if you want to erase terrain, it's just click it, lower it, shift click. You want to paint, just click, and to erase, shift click. It's pretty simple. So I'm just painting my riverbank here. And now let's say I want some snow, so I'll go back to my paint, and my layers are missing, so I just go to target, click on target layers, expand it out, and go to layers. So click on snow, and just click. So that's it. You just kind of click and paint, and you get your snow on where you want snow. But I'm going to paint snow all the way to the edge, and I'm going to show you a cool thing where we can do some blending. So what we can do is we can go to our paint tool, we'll go to our tool strength, we'll lower it to 0.25. We'll change the fall off to, let's say, 0.25. Or sorry, we can do a higher fall off, 0.1, and change our brush size to 512. And I'm going to shift click on the areas I want to kind of slightly erase my snow. And you can see it's kind of slightly doing it, but not a full erase. So it gives you that nice blend of materials together. We can even go change our fall off to 0.25 and get an even less blend, or less erasing, so you get more blending. I can go and click on my grass layer and also do that, shift click. And now you can see we're starting to get some blending here between the two materials. So I'm just shift clicking on the edges where the two materials meet. Click back on my snow material, kind of carve it away a little bit. And I'm just holding shift click to do this. And click on my grass material. And then we can maybe lower, increase our brush size to, let's say, 1024, or even let's say 1000. Go back to our snow material, just kind of shift click away, and let's even lower the tool strength, let's say 0.1, and let's do our fall off even lower, 0.1. Just kind of erasing away the edges of the layer so we get some blending between rock, snow, and grass. But you always want to make sure you click on the layer you want to erase or paint. So just click on my grass layer, and I'm holding shift click, and I'm kind of erasing what I don't need with a slow fall off. We can also do it here down at the riverbank. And that should be good. Go file, save. Let's minimize this. Let's add some static meshes to our scene so we can start building and fleshing this out even more. So go to content, we'll go to static mesh. If you don't see static mesh, go to filters and select static mesh. And I'll close out my search. And these are all the static meshes available in the landscape project. So I'm going to select this bridge here and drop it in. And I'm going to play around with this for a bit. I'm going to just kind of duplicate this guy. If you don't know how to duplicate, look at my Unreal Basics tutorial. But as a quick refresher, it's you hold Alt and left click with something selected and it will duplicate the object. So that looks pretty good right there. And now we can make some adjustments to our terrain so this fits in without raising or lowering the actual bridge. Let's say we want it right here. Now let's adjust the terrain. So we'll file save. We'll go back to our window modes, terrain, and we're not going to paint, we're going to sculpt. So click on sculpt, sculpt tool, and let's lower our brush size because we want to work with a fine space to, let's say, about 12. and we're going to shift click this space here. Before we do that, we want to make sure our tool strength is higher. It was set to 0.1, I made it to 0.5, and I want to shift click and slowly lower the terrain so I can see the mesh. There we go. Then we'll go back to my sculpt tool, go to flatten, and click away to flatten out what I don't want. Let's say I'm just going to make this road carve through this mountain right here. So we'll just flatten all this out, and we'll smooth out later. And we can flatten some of this area here too so we can see the road. And then we'll come back to our sculpt tool, shift click, just erase what we don't need so we can see the road mesh here. Go to our flatten tool and flatten this out. And let's carve through this mountain right here. Let's go back to our smooth tool. And I think the settings are fine. Maybe we can have a higher brush size, let's say 700. And start smoothing things out. Let's increase our brush size a bit. Let's go to, let's say 1024, and just do a wide smoothing. Just kind of in the general area and get that all smoothed out. Now let's clean up some of this area down here in our riverbank. Let's go back to a smaller brush size, 512, and let's click on flatten. And just kind of add some more. We can see more of the support beams here. Now we can go back to our replace, select all of our bridge here, just lower it just a bit, go back to terrain, go to smooth, and smooth everything out. So now we kind of starting to have a vignette being built, and so we can build around this and say what's missing, what do we need in terms of our landscape and painting. So I feel like we need a river, you know, it looks kind of empty, so let's add a river. We'll go to, click on place, we'll go to our content browser, and let's see what we have. There's a ice plane mesh, SM ice plane, select that, and we can scale this up. So it fits in the space we've carved out for it. That works. Now let's go back and we can add some more terrain painting. So we'll go back, just minimize this, and I'm just gonna kind of speed paint with what I think works, but again, just the basics are you want to go to your terrain tool, you want to click on sculpt, and you can use the sculpt tool, smooth tool, the flatten tool, and just clicking the tool will use it, shift click will erase it. So just I'm going to speed things up and kind of paint the terrain around it to something that I think will look cool. So I'll be right back. Alright, so kind of sped up the process of me just adding some more terrain. Again, I'm just using the sculpt tool, smooth tool, and the flatten tool, and the paintbrush, and using shift and using click and shift click to paint and erase what I don't need. So I'm pretty happy with what this looks like. Yours might look different, but that's the gist of the tools. So I want to make sure we go back to our modes and go to the place tool, and we're going to add some more static meshes to the scene. So minimize the modes. Let's look at the assets we have here. So we have a concrete tunnel, we have some cliffs, we have ice chunks, we have some trees. So let's do the cliffs. And I'm going to scale up this rock asset. Let's say I'm going to lock my scale and set it to 3. And I'm going to start adding these around the scene to fill in the space where I don't, well, not where I don't want stuff, but make it feel more natural with rocks. Let's make it even bigger. Let's do 5. I can go even larger than that. Let's do 10. Now setting up the rocks and where they should be in the size and scale is all about composition and I guess the actual art part of the project. So I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I'm just going to place some rocks around to see what feels good. And you can kind of mess around with that too, but that's not the point of the tutorial. The tutorial is just how to use a terrain tool and the other parts of the engine to make a neat looking landscape. So I'm just adding some more detail here with the static meshes. So the area doesn't feel as empty with just terrain. I will try not to spend too much time on this. Just want to give you a gist of it. Again, you can use a lot smaller rocks and different rocks to create composition and variation, but I'm not worried about that right now. Just trying to make it look decent, but not perfect. Because if I try to make it perfect, I'll be here all day. And just want to get the tutorial redone and show you how things work. So that looks pretty good. In fact, we can just add a bit more to the edge of our scene so it doesn't clip in the camera. And then we can go back to our terrain tool. Modes, terrain, smooth, and let's just smooth everything out. Do a large radius, let's say 1500, and let's just smooth things out. In fact, let's paint a little bit more terrain down here by the rocks. So we'll go to our sculpt tool and just click. Now we see some terrain, and we'll go to flatten and flatten this out. And we'll move the rocks in just a bit. The reason we're getting this hard line is that's the edge of our grid that we made. So 31 by 31 is probably smaller. So we can just adjust that with pinning in some rocks. We'll go back to our terrain tool, we'll flatten this out like that. And we'll go to our paint tool, click on grass, and just paint some grass. Go to our snow, lower the brush size to say 512, and paint some snow along the edge. And we'll do some fall off work and just kind of, let's say the strength is 0.1, and just shift click away a little bit. That looks pretty good to me. Now let's add in some trees. You can either go 2 ways about this. One, you can do it by hand, which will take a long time, but it works. You can go to content browser. You can click on pine tree and place 1, place 2, but it might take a long time, especially in a very large terrain or landscape. So what you can do is you can go to the foliage tool and we can add a foliage. So let me bring up the content browser next to it, and we'll click on the pine tree and drag it in. Let me minimize the content browser. Now in the add foliage type, click on the foliage, and then you'll have some details down here. Bring this to the center, make this bigger. So we're using the pine tree mesh, and then here's the density, 100. Foliage instance will be placed at this density specified in a 1,000 by 1,000 unit area. And scaling can be uniform, so they all look the same, or we can mix it. So let's mix it. Let's do some at 3, and let's do some at 5. And you can turn off the align to normal. And if we start, now you see this little bubble. Click on it, it added a bunch of trees. I think those trees are too big, so let's shift click and erase them. And let's do 1 minimum scale and 3 max scale. Let me just move this to the side. And I'm going to click, and there we go, we're getting a couple of trees. And we can do the same thing for rocks as well. We go back to our content browser. Let me just click on the place, and let's go to rock gravel. Let's add all 3 of them. Rock gravel, oh sorry, we have to go to our foliage, drop this in, drop in gravel 2 and rock gravel foliage. Now here's the thing, let me minimize this, come back. Right now it's going to paint all of these, so let's say I don't want the trees, so I can just click a checkbox on that, and it won't paint the tree. Check to activate currently selected types in the palette, so I don't want trees to be painted, I want rocks. And I can click on each rock and do the same thing. Let's say turn off align to normal, and we can do scale. We can do 0.5 and 1, and then another next rock we can do, let's say 0.25, 0.5, and the last rock set we can do say 0.2 and 0.4. If I start painting, you see little pebbles start showing. So again, I had the trees turned off. If I click this, I will get trees and pebbles. And I can turn that off and just paint some pebbles. File save. So when we do lighting, I'm not going to focus too much on lighting here because it's not a lighting tutorial, it's a landscape tutorial. So I'll refresh how to use landscape at the end. So just to do a quick lighting pass, we'll go. So the light build is done. Again, it's not the best lighting in the world because I'm not focusing on lighting. Just want the scene to be lit. But the purpose of the tutorial was to show how to do landscape. So to review, you can create a landscape very easily by going to your scene, going to modes, type landscape, drop a landscape actor, you apply the material, you set the painting materials, in our case was the snow and the grass that are default. You can use, once you have that and create it, you go to your terrain tool, you can go to sculpt. The main things you use is sculpt, smoothing, and flatten. And again, just to quickly review, if you click on, just click, and you can change your brush, the tool strength, size, and the brush size. And if you click, it will raise. It will sculpt up. Shift click, sculpt down. Smooth. Just click, smooth it out. Shift click. You can smooth that as well. You can go to flatten. Shift click and flatten as well. We can go to our painting, click on the layer, click it, paints it, shift click, unpaints. You can change the tool strength and the brush sizes to do some nice fall off work. So here in this final review, like I'm in my tool 0.1, brush size 256, fall off 0.2, and shift click and kind of erase what I don't need. Right and click and paint what I need. And if the layer is not working, it's because you probably don't have it selected. So always make sure you're on the right layer that you want to work on. And that's about it for how to use the terrain and landscape tools in Unreal Engine 4. Hopefully you guys like this tutorial and can actually see what I was working on compared to the last one. I'll be taking the last one down because it's pointless to have two tutorials on the channel for the same thing. As again, if you have any questions, let me know below. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. As always, be sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and also support me on Patreon. It'd be great if you really like the channel. You'd support whatever you feel like, and I appreciate that. And that's about it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.